Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie. We're broadcasting on all our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and across the world. We're bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m. on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, and on TikTok. Folks, please do send in your greetings, send in your comments, and send in your questions, and we'll give you a shout out on this great British evening. Now, folks, we are teleprompter free, and if you can, please do click the like button on YouTube and on Facebook and give us a share, because those are the ways in which these platforms are alerted to our broadcast. And it's one of the ways, especially on YouTube, that it sends out the broadcast to others. So please do interact with the like button if you can. And also on TikTok, give us a heart. Thanks very much. Give us a union heart for our great country, because we're British, we love the United Kingdom, and we want to stay together. And ours is a fight for the heart and for the mind and for the soul of our precious United Kingdom. And we're putting the United Kingdom first before any other concerns. Well, tonight we have a guest. Our guest is going to be Niall Fraser, and Niall will be coming on about 7:30, 7:35, and he's going to be telling us about the lessons that he's learned and his thoughts on his campaign at the Rutherglen and Hamilton West by-election, which was a couple of weeks ago now, but it's time enough for Niall to have considered the event and the exciting days that he spent campaigning for the Scottish Family Party. So he's going to be telling us about that, as well as the sort of approach that he's going to be adopting in the future. We also want to talk about our recent activism. We want to talk about the SNP Conference, and if we've got time, we might even sneak in a Busting Indie Myths Part 28. So a packed programme tonight, as always. Let's say hello to the people in the house. And first in was Derek, who says, "Good evening, AFFG and Alistair. I hope everyone is doing great. It's good to see in 10 years before and after the SSEC SNP Conference, when it had 12,000 delegates, and last weekend when it couldn't even fill the place that it was in Aberdeen." That's absolutely right. I saw a video of when the SNP was riding high just immediately after the 2014 referendum, because if you remember, they lost, and they lost badly, but of course the British state, in its normal uselessness, decided to give them a nice bouncy bed to bounce back on. So it gave them all these new powers, and it immediately rejuvenated them, and of course they went to a great and crushing victory in the 2015 Westminster general election. But those were the glory days, and the glory days are no more. In the past, they must and will remain, because we're asking tonight, is the SNP toast? And perhaps it is toast, but we've been around in politics for long enough to know that every party can bounce back, and we'll be talking about that also. Debbie, second in, says, "Good evening, everyone. Stay safe over the next few days." Hello to Dominic as well, and to Adam from the heart of rural England, Dee Stanners from Kilsyth, and Stuart from Elgin. Adam talks about Lisa Cameron, who's the SNP MP who's defected to the Tories, who made Kim Jong-Humza angry. Well, we're going to be talking about Lisa Cameron with Niall Fraser, who is from the same neck of the woods. That's our guest that will be coming up this evening. We've also got, of course, our On This Day in British History and our competition. And our competition will be for these Union Jack playing cards. Check those out. A deck of Union Jack playing cards. What could be better than that? Just looking at some of the comments on TikTok. Kyle says the SNP has not helped to get rid of poverty or food banks. That's absolutely so, Kyle. So stick around for the competition where you could win our Union Jack playing cards. That'll be coming up at 7:30. And all you need to do is to send an email to contact@aforceforgood.uk. Hello to Linda and to Melissa and to Peter, who says keep up the good work. We certainly will do that. And hello to Rita and to Catherine. Christopher says busting indie myths is always good. The SNP Conference like a mediocre band in its latter days. Wasn't it just? Well, Derek's looking forward to seeing Niall as well. And hello to Kathy. Good to see you in the house, Kathy. Welcome to the AFFG family. Now, what was AFFG doing last weekend? Well, last weekend we counted the Scottish Nationalists had a couple of events on. One of them was a march through Glasgow by a group called Yes to Indy. We videoed them, we counted them, and they took 48 seconds to pass our counting point, and there was 57 of them. And you can find our video on our YouTube channel, which has had almost 4,000 views. So in fact, we actually did publicise. We publicised their march actually more than people would even have seen it if we had not publicised it. In fact, probably just a few seagulls would have seen it if we had not publicised it for them. So they really owe us for that. But there was 57 of them. And then there was the chain of freedom. Now let's just talk about the so-called chain of freedom. Now we've got a map. What this was the Scottish Nationalists were trying to hold hands from Glasgow to Falkirk. It was initially going to be from Glasgow through Falkirk right to the Scottish Parliament. And they reckoned they could get 77,000 or something like that to hold hands. But the amusing thing was they genuinely did believe that they could do that. Anyway, of course they couldn't, and we said that they'll not be able to do that. Well, what happened on the actual day? Well, on the actual day, they got... Well, it's impossible to actually give an accurate figure. But we do have one or two little videos. Here's a video that one of our activists, or colleagues rather, took and sent to us. And let's play this. Now, this is somewhere at the beginning of the march, somewhere in Glasgow. Let's go ahead and play this video.
I think the English boy has come to the wrong place, hasn't he?
Who's the English boy? Oh, you? Oh, listen, this is dafties on display. Don't worry about them. They're supposed to be forming a chain across the whole of Scotland. They can't even fill this bit
this
here.
This is the independence thing.
Oh, yes, arseholes.
I just don't understand what it's going to help now.
It's not, but they're deluded, and you know, and it's supposed to be from Bowling, which is much further along, to the Falkirk Wheel. And this is the
This is the
section.
entirety of
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Well, no, there'll be other people in other places.
Well,
but
they're getting them
it's
to spread
certainly
out a bit.
it's certainly not a full chain.
No,
That's for sure.
Definitely not.
Deluded dafties on display, as the person who took that video very cleverly described them. Deluded dafties on display. And they finally, that little group did actually link hands as far along the canal as they could, and we've got the video of that, which is just a short one, which we'll play as well. There was about 25 there, and there was a lot of canal still to be manned. And you won't see the video on TikTok, folks, unfortunately, but you will if you check our UK A Force for Good over on YouTube. So we've seen quite a few other videos, and we've seen quite a few photographs, and there was a couple of points at which they did get a decent number, probably between 100 and 120 or maybe 150. And let's just go through the photographs that we've got here. Now there's one that's crossing a bridge, but as you'll notice, if you look under the bridge there, you'll see it's really only, it's a kind of semicircular bridge, but they're really only on this side of it. So there's really only the 40 or so that you see on the top of the bridge there. Okay. Now, that's probably their best one. That's, from what we could tell, that's about 120, 130 people there. That's taken with a drone. Okay. And I think that's at a different place. And again, that's about 100 people there. So they had a couple of places where they could get a good turnout. And most of the photographs that you see on the internet are taken from those two positions, are taken of the crowds on those two lines in two different parts of the canal there, okay? But most of the pictures are like that, which is to say 15 people or so at various points. Okay. So we have not seen any video or picture evidence to suggest that there was much more than 500, and that's being quite generous, because we're always keen to be as generous as we can. So we've not seen any evidence that would suggest that there was more than 500 at the various places in their entirety. And we can't, unlike our normal videos, obviously we can't prove that, because the canal, that whole area is a huge area. But from what we've seen, and we've studied all the pictures and video evidence, we don't see any evidence for more than 500 in total. Just so that you know that that's our considered opinion. Certainly no more than 500 in the entirety of the event. Where if anybody's got other footage that can convince us otherwise, by all means, please share it with us. Okay, folks, remember you can give us a super chat tonight. Do we have any super chats? You should be able to give us a super chat anyway. If you're not able to, if you can't see the super chat button, click on the three little buttons and it might come up. Okay. Alan, nice to see Alan in the house. says, I hope you're all doing well. Now, we've got our guest coming up at about 7:35 tonight. Now, what I want to do, of course, I need to remind everybody that tomorrow, no, I won't remind you, I'll remind you about that at the last point of the night. Now, it was the SNP Conference on Sunday, Monday and Tuesday, and has already been noted far fewer people than normal at an SNP conference. But from our particular standpoint, the interesting thing that they did decide was their strategy for the 2024 general election. And what they're going to argue is that if they get a majority of the 57 seats in Scotland, they are going to claim that as a quote-unquote mandate, as a quote-unquote authority for them to take forward their position of negotiating for Scottish so-called independence. That is, if they get a majority of the seats, there'll be 57 seats in Scotland, so 29 will be the majority. Now, this differs from the other mandates that they were talking about, one of which was simply to have a majority of seats, not a majority of all the seats. For example, a majority of seats would be 26 for the SNP, 24 for Labour, and 7 for the Tories, for example. But they're not going with that. They're going with the majority of all the seats, which means they'd have to get 29 out of 57. Now, this differs from Nicola Sturgeon's suggestion last year that they would go for a majority of all the votes on the day. That is, if 50 plus 1 of the people who bothered to vote on the day voted for SNP, that would be the so-called mandate. So they're going with this majority of all seats, which is an interesting tactic. And why are they doing that? One of the reasons will be basically to set the bar fairly low. They probably looked at their options next year. They've probably looked at what's possible, and they've thought, well, we possibly could get 29 out of the 57 seats. So they're doing that. They're also hoping that if they get a decent number of seats like that, then they'll have some kind of leverage if there were to be a government that needed their support. For example, if Keir Starmer won, but he didn't win by a particular large majority, the SNP would be hoping that they could put their oar in there and they could say, hey mate, we've got 29 seats, we've got the majority of seats, we've got a mandate for a second referendum, and if you don't give us a second referendum, then we are going to cause trouble for you. So they're going to be hoping that all of those sorts of planets align for them. And it's possible they could do well next year. And I was thinking about that, and I thought, look what happened to Labour under Blair during the Iraq War. Labour lost a lot of support in Scotland as a consequence of Labour's support for the Iraq War, and all the people who were against, all the Labour supporters who were against the Iraq War, and there was a significant number of them, they went with Alex Salmond's SNP. Now, goodness knows what's going to happen in the Middle East over the next few months, but if that situation deteriorated into some kind of shooting war where Britain was forced to side against, for example, Iran or Syria, and you had basically we're going into a general election with a war, then what you'll get, and if Labour support it, and if Keir Starmer supports another war in the Middle East, then all these Labour people will flock back to the SNP. That's something that one needs to be aware of. It's something that Starmer needs to be aware of. as well as Rishi Sunak. And it will be Labour's Iraq war catastrophe all over again. And if Starmer were to be elected, and if he were to continue to prosecute such a war, then again, the SNP are just going to start rising in the polls again. So it can depend on how Labour go with this whole unfolding situation as well. So that's just something I'm putting out there to be aware of. So they could do well next year, depending upon the international situation, or they could do fairly poorly. We'll just have to wait and see. Certainly at the moment, the trajectory does appear to be downwards. We'll speak with Niall about his thoughts on that as well when we speak to him at 7:30 this evening. Now, talking of mandates, last week I was speaking about the extent to which the SNP have never had a majority of the turnout at any Scottish or British election, and they've certainly never had a majority of the electorate at any Scottish or British election. And I spoke about the figures from 2007 when they got into power in Scotland. And this week we've put all those figures into an article which is on our Substack, and you'll find the link to that article in the thread. And in a moment we'll also bring up the graphic that summarises all of those points. Tom says, new Tory MP Lisa Cameron was cheered as she joined Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's group at the House of Commons for the first time on Wednesday. Yes, she was. What does this button do? Says, the thing is, the SNP was always hijacked by the craziest Labour Party members, making Labour and the SNP like Sonic the Hedgehog. Now they're flocking back to Labour, but Scotland's the loser, never getting any Conservative rebalance. Tom says, the former nationalist Lisa Cameron made the decision to leave her SNP party, blaming a bullying and a toxic culture. Indeed. So, we've got our guest coming up at 7:30. What I want to do before then, we've got our competition as well for our playing cards, Union Jack playing cards. What I want to do is show you the graphic that we have done that details the mandates. Here we go. I've put it up. If you go to our Substack article, it's free for the moment. Everybody can read it. We detail this and we publish this graphic showing the SNP vote expressed as a percentage of the electorate and the SNP vote expressed as a percentage of turnout at every single one of the 8 elections since 2007. And that's a very valuable graphic. I've never seen it written down and publicised like that. And that article will go into a chapter in our book if we can get it published by the end of the year. We're still trying to raise some financing to get the book underway in order to get everybody sorted for that. But if we can raise the financing for that, then that will be one of the chapters in the book. Good stuff. now I want to do on this day in British history matters. And folks, I will ask you a question about this afterwards, and the winner will get not only this Union Jack playing cards packet, but will also get a copy of our latest magazine worth £4.50, Union Heart, King and Country. Good. Well, what happened on this day in British history? Well, on this day in British history, a very important matrimonial union, the woman of which passed away on this day, 18th of October in 1541. The Scottish Queen Margaret Tudor, who was married to James IV of Scotland, he died. And unfortunately, at the Battle of Flodden, but she died on this day in 1541, and she was the eldest daughter of Henry VII of England and Elizabeth of York, and she was the older sister of Henry VIII. But Henry VII wanted a matrimonial bond between England and Scotland, and so his daughter Margaret Tudor was hitched up with James IV, and they basically, Margaret Tudor is in a way responsible for the union of the crowns, which was to follow in 1603, because when Elizabeth I died, she was the last Tudor, she died childless, and England had no king or queen, and so they looked around and they found James VI, who was actually a direct descendant of Margaret Tudor, so he was the closest that England could find. And in fact, that was the case of Mary Queen of Scots as well, who she argued that she was in fact the rightful Queen of England and not Elizabeth I. And that's why, unfortunately, Elizabeth I chopped her head off, because she couldn't have that competition. But eventually Margaret Tudor's heirs came around, and James VI became king in 1603, not only of Scotland, but of England, and of course famously declared himself king of Great Britain, the first union, as it were. So she died, Margaret Tudor died on this day. We've got a picture of Margaret Tudor, let's stick her up there. There we go. Quite a fulsome lass. And I like this wee cartoon of her, not cartoon, but drawing of her, which is the next picture. There you go. There she is there with James IV. They married, and eventually they would produce, or rather James VI would claim the kingship of England as a consequence of that particular marriage. Cool. Okay. Well, we lay all this out in our magazine King and Country. In the middle pages, we've got Scottish roots of the British royal family. And the chap here has James IV, who married Margaret Tudor. Followed by James V, followed by Mary Queen of Scots, followed by her son James VI of Great Britain. And he called his son Henry, after Henry VII, and he called his daughter Margaret after Margaret Tudor. So there you go. Now we've got our guest coming up at in just 2 or 3 minutes. Hello to Scotland Scorpion. Nice to see you. D. Stannis says the National said there was 45,000. Surely not. That would just be absurd. But like a lot of things, unless you can actually, like a lot of propaganda, unless you can actually verify it, then people just end up saying anything, and it's impossible not to contradict it because it's just so much made up that there's no way you can contradict it, certainly not in the moment. As we say, it was more likely 500 or thereabouts. And as Christopher says, 500 people who are missing out on something more exciting, like going to Tesco on a Saturday morning, for example. Fantastic. We have a super chat, and it's Derek Hart. Thank you very much, Derek. That's really kind of you. Derek's taken advantage of the super chat mechanism to send us some money because we're now monetized. We're now monetized on Facebook. Great stuff. Now, hello to Fraser from Spain. Slim says hello. Alan wonders if Hamza's support for Palestine is going to put many off him. It's an interesting thought. I'm not entirely sure, really. I think most of the crowd who vote SNP or Labour won't let that bother them at all. That's my understanding of that. Most people in Scotland, as far as the left is concerned, I think that unless he makes a major kind of slip up, I'm not so sure personally whether that will make a whole lot of difference. It depends how the situation develops, and if it develops into a kind of Iraq war situation, then I think the SNP will pick up a lot of support from if the Labour Party is seen to be promoting war. At least that's the lesson that we can pick up from the Blair and Iraq war situation. Time will tell. Christopher thinks we need to get that graphic out in a further manner. Yes, we will. We'll get it out. Nice to see Kevin. Good evening to Kevin. Now, folks, it's time to ask the question, and the winner will get this pack of Union Jack playing cards. Send your answers, please, to contact@aforceforgood.uk. Now, if you've never done it before, that's all you have to do. Fire up that email and send your answer. The question is, on this day, 18th of October in 1541, a Scottish queen died. What was her name? Okay, what was the name of the Scottish queen who died on this day back in married to James IV? And we'll have the answer at the top of the hour and a winner. And the winner will get this and also a free copy of our latest magazine worth £4.50 winging its way to you tomorrow. Send your answers, please, to contact@aforceforgood.uk. Now, we're about to bring in our man, Niall Fraser. Folks, please say hello to Niall. Niall was the Scottish Family Party candidate at the Rutherglen and Hamilton West by-election, and he's going to tell us all about his adventures on that particular escapade. Now, folks, if you're watching on TikTok, you won't see the interview. You'll only hear me when I speak, but you can watch the interview at youtube.com/UK A Force for good. Let's bring in Niall. Good evening, Niall.
Good evening, Alistair. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much for coming on the show. Now, Niall, you were the Scottish Family Party candidate. We have got the results, actually. We'll just bring up the
Beautiful
results and we'll just talk the viewer through it. So Labour won famously.
Huge landslide.
Yes, and you are there with your 319 votes, just below Reform UK.
Yes.
Now, that we'll just remove the
I'm glad I got more votes than the Prince Ankit Love, the Emperor of India. I thought that would be an intense embarrassment if I had not beat the Emperor of India. Although I can imagine he should have got more votes than just 34, but I'm actually quite proud of that result, actually.
Yes. Well, tell us your thoughts on that. Did it come as a surprise to you?
No, I thought I would do it slightly better than that, if I'm honest. I'm glad that I'm on par with Reform, just by the virtue of the fact that we spent almost nothing in this election, nothing at all. Reform has got an annual budget of, I think, £700,000. So we are just a flicker, 80 votes away from Reform, having spent literally like zero money. We've spent the £500 deposit and the leaflets. So, I mean, the campaign was right from start to finish. It was really quite amazing, just as an experience, all the way from designing a leaflet to chatting people's doors and asking them to vote for me. So I've went full circle with sort of, my tactic originally was to sort of dominate the high street in Rutherglen. So the high street, I was there 3 days a week. Hi Derek, thanks for saying that. So dominating the high street 3 days a week, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and just really pound the message into the street and into the people in the street that I'm not going away, that this question needs to be, that this gender aspect that I was focusing on, it was very narrow focus. I was saying this election's about defeating a lie, the lie being that you could change sex. So I had very consistent messaging on that, all the way from the debates to the STV 20 seconds, which was a bit of a joke as well. I mean, all the other candidates get, well, not all the other candidates, but the quote-unquote main candidates, they get a full debate show, whereas the rest of the candidates are forced to condense their message into 20 seconds, Alistair. So I don't know if you could, if anyone could convey such a complex political message over 20 seconds. Yeah, it's just impossible.
Well, you say that, but I think you did it very well. I've seen the clip of your point of view. I don't know if we've got it handy, the 20-second clip. If we do have it handy, then we'll play it. But I thought you did very well. But you shouldn't have had 20 seconds. You should have had, of course, 20 minutes to explain your point of view and to be quizzed and to be able to bring out the nuances and further points that you obviously wanted to make. But sometimes it's best just to simplify it right down to 1.3 at the most, perhaps, that because people are not that politically savvy necessarily. They just want to hear the main point, and that's really all. So I think you made your point very well, and I do congratulate you on the
thank you
on that, and also on your approach of just dominating the high street,
which had its own difficulties. Just some anecdotes, so early on in the street campaigning, so it was quite a condensed short campaign of about 3 weeks. So we were given about 3 weeks. So I was on initially when I was on the high street, I was gauging the people's reaction to stuff, and then we had a few placards, billboards, whatnot, and there was this one that stuck out and seemed to be triggering people on the street. And it was this big sign we had that says, "A man can't become a woman simple." But all the insane reactions to that, as one would expect, we've had some people calling me up saying, "That's misogynistic." I'm saying, "Oh, go on. Where's your sign that says a woman can't become a man? Simple." And I said, "Well, actually, if you think about it, it reads the same, vice versa, you know." But this sign really was triggering people, so I wanted to maximize that effect. So then I just multiplied the signs. I had 3 of those signs. So I had facing both sides of the street, one facing the road, and then you were getting the peeps for people on the road. You were getting both sides of the street walking back and forth. And a lot of people, I mean, the things that encouraged me during this election was, you know, there was a situation where there was a young father walking along with a buggy and his young son holding him by the hand. And he was pointing to the sign and he says, "Read that, son," or "Can you read that?" And he says, "Yes." Says, "That's the truth, and you won't learn that in school." So this is the type of thing that really does keep you going, Alistair. It's it was amazing to see some of these reactions, but it really was splitting opinion, mostly between the difference between men and women on this issue is quite stark. You know, I think women are more agreeable on the whole than men. So they're more willing to go along with this sort of fantasy type delusion or this ideology rather than the men just saying, "No, that's wrong," calling it out straight away. So, I mean, I loved the campaign, frankly. And just going back to the result, we're only 1% away for the Greens. They've got 2 government ministers. They have over-representation, I believe, in Scottish politics. So the fact that we're creeping up on the Greens, creeping up on the Lib Dems, and sort of on par with Reform, makes us a force to be reckoned with. And, you know, just at the count as well. The count was interesting as well. So obviously it's like a political fanfare. You've got all these delegates for all these different parties, councillors, MSPs, MPs, you name it, they were there. And when my result got read out, all the Greens booed. All the Greens booed my vote coming in. And, you know, I don't take it personally, but again, they're not just booing me, they're booing the people who voted for me as well, which I think is just frankly disgusting. For people to had the courage to vote for me and to vote out with the established voting blocks, but then to sort of boo people that voted for that. It's beyond the pale, actually.
It's a good point. The Scottish Cabbage Party, as I like to call them, the soggy Greens, are often beyond the pale in some of the ridiculous things that they come up with. Mm-hmm. And there's been a definite change since Harvey took over, which has been for a while. But where it used to be that guy who looked like Doctor Who, you know, he'd walk about with a hat and a scarf on. You're talking about, and he was semi-intelligent and quite sensible on many things. He was also a Unionist, believe it or not, as well. And he remains so. He's still around. So he was a kind of old school Green, but I knew people who were in the Green Party at that time, and I knew a bloke. I won't be breaking any confidences when I say that he got pushed out by Patrick Harvey because he didn't go along with the sexualisation of the Greens, the idea that we're going to transform this from an environmental party to basically a party that's only concerned about sexuality issues. Mm-hmm. And Harvey made that very clear, and this was going way back to the beginnings of the Scottish Greens in the Holyrood Parliament when Harvey was the up-and-coming star. And so this guy got pushed out, and he would have been a candidate. He would have been the lead candidate for one of the regions in Scotland at the forthcoming Scottish election, as it was back then. And no, it was clear that there was going to be no allowance for anybody who wasn't going along with the sexual program. So very odd party and a very weird party, and unfortunately Scotland has suffered as a consequence of these people. But you've been fighting back, and the Scottish Family Party has been formed, maybe not necessarily in a response to the Greens, but in a response to the sort of things that they've been bringing into society. So I wish you the very best. And you make a good point there about 2026 at the next election. You know, you might be able to surpass the Greens depending upon what conditions society is in by then.
Well, certainly, I think if we maintain momentum, if we continue doing what we're doing, if we keep holding conferences, doing stunts, railing against the ULEZ situation, which is a new one. We've got these signs that we're putting under the ULEZ signs that basically say, can you afford a new car? If yes, drive on. If no, get out and walk. Simple messages like this, like only the wealthy beyond this point. We're being very proactive in our approach to politics, and we're sort of I like to call my campaign like campaigning 2.0. I mean, everyone is so sick and tired of the SNP and the Labour's version of campaigning, which is just social media pictures. You'll see the pictures, they're out in the street with their canvassers and they've got their leaflets. And amazing response on the doors, sensational. We had brilliant conversations, not one negative conversation. Whereas I'm just being brutally honest with people. I'm saying, look, people are heckling us on the street. People are throwing things at us. There was a situation where a guy tried to spit on us, all because of this sign, all because that these people are living in this impenetrable bubble of their own reality. And when the truth, or when their reality is confronted by the truth, it just causes pandemonium in this person's brain. So they cannot deal with it. So at least we're getting through to people in that aspect.
Absolutely. Well, I do notice we do have that wee 20-second clip which summarised your point, so we'll just go ahead
Beautiful.
and play that just now.
This election
STV.
is about defeating a lie, a sick lie that a person can change sex. Our education system is turned into an indoctrination system. If you believe that a man can dress up like Barbie, and because he's clutching a bit of paper, that he should be able to enter women's spaces, then go ahead and vote for one of the machine candidates, the robo candidates. Otherwise, vote for me.
Go ahead and vote for one of the machine candidates or the robo candidates.
Yeah.
Otherwise, vote for me. I think you summed that up quite well there in 20 seconds. Absolutely.
I don't think you can do much more than that, Alistair, if I'm honest. I tried to be as forceful as I could. I had discussions with Richard about this 20 seconds, because I viewed it as the most important 20 seconds in the actual election. It's the state broadcaster, it's STV. We're reaching as many homes as possible. There's still a lot of people that watch STV. So I wanted to make it very forceful. And then the discussion was with Richard that people weren't even going to understand what I mean by if you think because a guy is dressed up like Barbie and because he's clutching a bit of paper. And he says, well, do you know you want to say they're clutching a gender recognition certificate? I said, no. So slow down, Richard. It's much more simple than that. It's just a piece of paper. That's all that it is. A piece of paper does not make, does not allow you to change sex. It's as simple as that. So we were very forceful in our rhetoric, but I reckon they got the message across. And considering the result, I believe it sort of resonated with a lot of people.
Yes. Oh, it did. It did. And the thing is, if you had been on the telly all the time in the way that the Labour man was, or the SNP man was, then hundreds more people would have voted for you. because politics does really come down at the end of the day to
the media,
to the media, yeah, and being seen, and social media, and these sort of independent forms of getting your own message out. It's become easier, a lot easier since, like, I was standing in that constituency back in, was it 1990? Oh no!
So you didn't have the
2001,
advantages of social media, right?
Yeah.
So you can't bypass the sort of established media press corps, and at that point, that's almost insurmountable, Alistair. You know, thinking back to the 90s, it would be insurmountable to sort of come from nowhere, unless you were in the papers all the time, unless you were on the TV all the time.
Yes, and that's why the powers that be don't like social media and are always trying to figure out ways, in which to censor it as well. I've just been reminded the name of the Green Man was Robin Harper. He was the leader, and for that first few years they managed to keep a lid on the Nutter Brigade, but when he stepped down, it was just all hands on the nutty deck, basically.
I think Stuart MacDonald puts it the best. So the amount of people that I had conversations with the door that actually knew me, that actually said, I know who you are, Niall. I would love to vote for you. In fact, I can't wait to vote for you in a time where I can actually vote for you. This election was viewed as an anti-SNP election, and everyone coalesced behind Labour, which I don't blame anyone at all. I mean, they absolutely thumped the SNP, and effectively it's ended the SNP's election chances, you know, further down the line, going towards the general election. I don't think the SNP will win one seat. I truly believe I don't think they're going to win one seat. I think it's going to be an absolute rout. It's over and done with for the SNP as far as I'm concerned.
What on that sort of topic, what do you make of this lady Lisa Cameron, the SNP MP, defecting to the Tories? That seems like a huge leap. How do you any theories on explaining that?
Well, I've had loads of conversations about this as well, because if you think about it, if she wanted to further her career, I just say I'm Lisa Cameron for a second, and I want to remain an MP, and I want to remain on this gravy train, so to speak, I would have just jumped into Labour. You know, you would think that you would just jump into Labour. The political gravity is moving in that in that direction. So, and it would be a much smaller leap and a more understandable leap from the SNP into Labour, rather than from the SNP and you're leapfrogging Labour and then you're landing in the Tories' lap, which makes no sense really, unless it's either along strictly ideological grounds when it comes to the GRR or this Gender Recognition Act. But then it's almost like a kick in the teeth to the SNP. I think the way that Lisa Cameron's been bullied, abused, and sort of mentally tortured being in the SNP, that she really wants revenge. It's best served cold, but she's moved right into the Tories in order to exact that revenge. That makes a lot more sense to me than her trying to jump on a gravy train. It doesn't make any sense, because the Tories don't really stand a chance in East Kilbride. It's right next door to Rutherglen and Hamilton West, so you'd think that it's just going to be another Labour win there come the general election. So I think Lisa Cameron's, it's definitely an interesting case. I'd like to actually speak to her personally and ask her opinion, or ask her rationale on why. But for me, I'm weighting it towards more sort of kicking the SNP as she's leaving. You know, it's more of a kick in the teeth, and it's more of a sort of a passing, like a stab in the back as she's leaving the building, basically.
Yes. Interesting thought. It could be. Well,
what do you make of it? I mean, it's never been done before, right? This jump, especially from the pro-Indy party to the Conservative and Unionist party, the clues in the name. So I've never seen that jump made, but I encourage it.
Yes, I wondered if, I mean, the Tories must have been in touch with her and said, why don't you come and join us? And perhaps, I don't know, perhaps they made some kind of promise that will ensure that we'll put you, you can stand for us as an MP, or we'll put you at the top of the list in 2026. So maybe there was something there that helped to butter up the move. I'm just surmising politically. Or it could be that she did have a conversion, and she did realise, as she did say, that she thought SNP was too divisive. So maybe she has had a genuine conversion to coming around to the cause of unity. And maybe just no Labour people reached out to her, which wouldn't surprise me either. Sometimes we put too much credit in these parties to have such common sense.
It takes me back to a debate that was had during the campaign. So there was 2 hustings that I was available to go to. The first one was boycotted by SNP, Labour, Lib Dems. All the main parties didn't go. It was the Women Want Wished hustings. So that was the only public hustings there were, where there was members of the public available to literally ask questions directly to their MPs. Right. So all the main parties totally avoided that. But the next one was a studio-controlled, only candidates in the studio situation, very controlled, very time-managed. You got a minute opener, you got a minute closer. But during the debate, the moderator asked us, well, the Scottish Family Party is neutral on the idea of independence. And I got a great response when I says, absolutely, we're neutral. I mean, I'm a unionist. I'm quite happy to say that. But we've got other people that think that in the grand scheme of things, in the list of priorities that we've got here in Scotland, independence is maybe 10 out of 10 on the list of priorities. And we understand that. And that got a great response. So maybe it's coaxing this sort of attitude where actually maybe we need to at least shelf this independence argument for at least another 10 years minimum before we can actually broach it again. I think that's sort of permeating through the political class at the moment.
Yeah, that could be a good. That might be correct. Yes, it's a good point that you make. It's coming up for the top of the hour, so we're going to call this to an end, Niall. But just to say that if people want to follow you each day, or your comments each day, it's at twitter.com/Niall Fraser 8. And if people want to support you, they can go to coffee.com, which is ko-fi.com/Niall Fraser. That's NIALLFRASER.
And very briefly before I go, Alistair, I actually managed to pick up one of your wee union books, a wee book for the unions, the competitor to the wee blue book, This is such a good tool to instantly dispel some of these myths surrounding Scottish independence, instantly dispel all this nonsense that Scotland's not represented in the Union. Absolutely sublime work, Alistair. I just wanted to point that out.
Great. Thanks very much. Thanks for I'm glad you got your hands on a copy of that, and I'm glad that you like it. We find that we do sell quite a few of these. They keep us going. Our next effort is going to be a bigger book for the Union. We're more about that in time, if we can raise the financing for it and so on. And in fact,
maybe not the wee book, but the big book for the Union.
Well, this is what it's going to be. We decided we were going to write a big book, but then we thought, well, how big is big? Because it's just going to keep going on and on and on. So what we're going to do is we're going to break it into volumes, like Winston Churchill, would write his 6-volume history of himself or whatever. And so we're going to do that as well. And we'll just put out a volume per year. That's our ideal. A volume per year of the big book for the Union. Each will have a snappy title. and it'll
Excellent.
be volume 1 in a big book for the Union, volume 2 in a big book for the Union, etc., etc. So we do have big plans in that regard. Niall, thank you very much for
That's an absolute pleasure.
everything. We'll get you back on again. You're always a favourite, and it just remains for me to say have a pleasant evening. Thanks
Thanks
again.
very much, Alistair. You too.
Take care. Good stuff. Niall Fraser, always a great guest on the show, and hope to have him back. So folks, let's show some thanks there. Stuart says, great stuff, Niall and Alistair. And who else? Alan says, thanks, Niall. And Niall is now out of the studio, and Niall has left the building. G. Stanners says, all the best, Niall. And Derek says, great show. Catherine says, thanks, Niall. Now, Niall mentioned the wee book for the Union there. This is a real good book. If you haven't got it, please do go to our shop, which is at shop. It's at forceforgood.uk/shop-1. There we are. And you can pick up your copy of that while stocks last, folks. Good. Now, we have a winner. We asked the question for this pack of Union Jack playing cards. We said, on this day in 1541, what was the name of the Queen of Scotland who died? And the answer was Margaret Tudor. And the winner is Davy. Davy, fantastic. Davy, please, if we don't have it, use that same email and send your mailing address to us via that same email, and we'll get this in the post to you tomorrow, Davy, and we'll also send you a free copy of our latest magazine. So congratulations to Davy for that. And if you want just to pick up a copy of this, go to our shop. If you want a copy of our latest magazine, King and Country. This is also available free to all monthly donors. So you can become a monthly donor as well, and you'll get all our magazines free on request, which is a good blooming deal because this is £4.50. And so if you're a monthly donor, getting these magazines free is a good deal. What else will you also get? You'll also get our wee badges. And you'll also get our thanks. Christopher says these are good playing cards for a game with nationalists down the pub. Certainly are. Now, let me just check if there's anything more that I need to say. We're going to be out this weekend with the street stall. If anybody wants to join us, please contact me and I'll tell you where we're going to be. But I think that's everything that I wanted to cover, folks. It's been a great crowd tonight. Thank you very much for coming in. Thanks for everybody's comments. We will be back next week. So it just remains for me to say thank you. God bless the United Kingdom, and God save the King. See you next week.